have in today's gospel that Jesus has now moving on to the next step of his plan for setting up the church. He begins to choose the 12 men to be his friends and apostles. He told his son and his disciples and picked out 12 of them. He called them apostles. So the first thing for us to know is that we probably didn't think about it, but what is the difference between a disciple and an apostle? Are the terms interchangeable? We can sometimes be rather casual in our use of these terms, but we must know what exactly a disciple and an apostle means. Every apostle is a disciple, but not every one of Jesus' disciples was formally called an apostle. The word disciple is applied to any person who commits himself to be a follower of Jesus. The word disciple comes from the Latin word discere. Discere means to learn. So the disciple is sitting at the feet of the master and learning from him, who tries to follow his master's footsteps. When you do that, there's a certain discipline that comes from following. That's where the word discere comes from. So Jesus' disciples regularly called him rabbi, which means teacher. So they were his disciples. But now Jesus went to another level altogether, and he calls them or chose his apostle. Apostle has a much more active meaning. The word apostle comes from the Greek word apostello. It refers to a person who is sent out on a mission, a person with a task, a person with something to do, sent forth as from a higher authority, as an emissary, a delegate to pass on information or commands or instructions to others on behalf of some authority. The apostle is going to fulfill what he has been given. So this is who we are called to be. We are not just followers, we are not just disciples, we are apostles. So in the choice of the 12, we see the characteristic feature of God's work. Jesus chose very ordinary people. They were non-professionals. They did not have power or wealth. They were just ordinary men. So they were chosen from the common people who did ordinary things. No special education, no social advantage. So it's a reminder for all of us that God doesn't call people because they're outstanding or whatever. God calls us, all of us. So the three dimensions here. Jesus wanted first ordinary people for what? For the second point, for a godly mission to be done. The third point is extraordinary will. And that's what God expects from all of you. God is not going to call you because you are good or great. Forget that. He's going to call you because He's already given you the gifts and talents that He knows what you're capable of. The second is God, He gives you a godly mission to be done. And it's a mission belongs to God, not you. You don't do what you want. You're not an apostle if you do that. You do what God wants. Third one, God is calling you to do it with extraordinary will, which means to say to rely that your power, your strength comes from God, not you. If you're going to do it on your own accord, your own willpower, it will fail because it's not a godly mission. So they have to realize that the power, the ability all comes from God. So there's a way for them to always realize a few points for yourself. One, God is the one they depend on. It reminds them of the need to connect to God. Two, that they are nobody, they're just merely instruments of God's love. He chose these men not for what they were, but what they would be capable of becoming under His direction and power. Three, fosters humility in their attitude to their mission. God doesn't want a proud, arrogant person. This humility means willing to listen learn. 4, that the mission belongs to God, not yours. So trust in God. 5, it is God's will that is to be fulfilled. Obeying God wisely. So in the gospel, my dear friends, the word apostle first applies to the 12 people who were especially chosen by Jesus to hand on his message. They will become the foundation stones of the new community of faith. These 12 men will form the base, the foundation, the root that is necessary to form the church. In that will be invested the integrity of the original message. They are supposed to safeguard it, authenticate it, and live it. It will be up to them to interpret the meaning of the teachings of Jesus. That's how the church began. Jesus had many disciples, but just 12 of them were chosen to pass on his teaching after he left them. Jesus could have chosen more? Of course. Or why 12? Why 12? That one will be answered in the next WWD Formation Talk. The next first Tuesday in September, October. But that's 12. And they in turn will appoint others with the same mandate. Today it is our bishops who have that mandate. But today the word apostle also applies to every baptized Christian. All of us, one way or another, my dear friends, are called to pass on the gospel message. That very action, that very mission itself makes you an apostle. Makes you an apostle. Every single one of Jesus' followers was called to be the salt of the earth and light of the world. And so they're called to behave in such a way that people will be led to God by the way they live their lives. So it's a good question to ask yourself, is anybody inspired by your life? Have you inspired anybody by the way you live your Catholic faith? We're very sad. We're called the salt of the earth and light of the world, and nobody is inspired by you. Then you need to ask yourself, are you living your Catholic faith? One thing is clear. It is not enough for us to be simply disciples or passive followers. We're not one of the crowd. We're not here just to listen and learn. We're here to evangelize. We're here to bring others to Christ. We're here to